Yeah, it's me again. I wanted to just remind y'all of why Jill Stein raised money to do a recount. She claims the system has been hacked and thousands of votes may have been compromised. So she has so far raised over $7 million in donations for recounts in 3 states, 2 of which aren't even hooked to a centralized internet-based system and thus are not hackable. One is a paper ballot only system, and paper cannot be hacked. Now, this is Jill Stein of the Green Party, who received maybe 1% of the nationwide vote, if that. She really has no reason to be involved in this recount. She barely got any support. She has less support than Mr. What's Aleppo, and Hillary already conceded, and you can't take a concession back. Just ask Al Gore, who went to court. He actually went to court to try to take back his concession, and they said no. So it can't be undone once it's been given. So again, she's raised over $7 million in donations. She spent under about $3.5 million in Wisconsin thus far, like 3,499,000 or something like that. But to what end? So far, Trump is still ahead, as they've only garnered like a few votes extra for Hillary and a few votes extra for him. According to one report, before counting stopped on the 3rd day, in Washburn County alone, the total ballots for Trump-Pence should have been counted as 385, even though they were reported at 352. So that's an almost 30 gain for Trump right there. So with a handful here for her and 1 or 2 extra there for him, it doesn't appear that there's going to be a change in the Wisconsin election. And you know what? She knew that. But now this leaves Jilly Bean $3.5 million left. Pennsylvania wants $1 million for a recount. She has $3.5 million left, and they want only $1 million to do the recount. But she is federally suing Pennsylvania and Michigan to put the recount on the taxpayer dime. And from reports, that could hit Michigan taxpayers with a $12 million bill. If you still have close to $4 million in money raised, why are you dickering about $1 million requested by Pennsylvania? Why do you want that to be taxpayer funded? What was the point of raising money for a recount if you're not going to pay the money for the recount? Where's the money, Jilly Bean? Show us the money. Come on, where's the money, honey? Seriously. She raises millions of dollars. She pays one state, but she actually, from what I've heard, she still owes that state. She hasn't even paid them in full. But she pays one state only to prove that the election night results were legitimate. Then she still has millions of dollars, but's demanding the taxpayers foot the bill for the recounts in those states when she doesn't even have a rational reason to demand the recount. And she says she's doing it for the people. Well, thanks a lot, lady, but people in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania are taxed enough. They were fine with the results until you came along. And like I said, she raised $7 million and has only spent about $3 million of that. Where's the rest of the money? Why can't she afford $1 million to do a recount? That was the whole point of the money that was donated. It was specifically for the recount, but for some reason, she's acting as if it's her money, and I'm not going to pay $1 million to recount on my dime. That's what you raised the money for, and you have it. You paid Wisconsin after Wisconsin, who hasn't even been finished paying, by the way. You still have $3.5 million, and they just want $1 million to do the recount. That still leaves you with $2.5 million. But yet she wants Michigan and she wants Pennsylvania to foot the bill. She wants the taxpayers to foot the bill. She's going to stiff Wisconsin for the remainder of what she owes for, the time that they're putting into this recount that is proving to be fruitless. And she's going to pocket the over $3 million. Seriously. This proves how shady, underhanded, immoral, and ridiculous the progressives and the left are. Hillary calls it horrifying that Trump refused to say he would not challenge the results if he lost. Then there has been nonstop crying and challenging of the results from their side ever since he won. Even Hillary, who conceded, is encouraging this nonsense. And now this is becoming the taxpayers' problem. Now, if you're listening for the first time, I recommend everyone go back and listen to my previous episodes. Episode 1 deals with the Electoral College, people crying about how it's a bad system unless it works for them, and that it needs to be demolished except when it works for them. And I explain why we have it. Because, each state gets a fair representation and a fair say, so populous states like California can't call all the shots. Because mandates from the highest office affects every state individually in different ways. So every state has a say about how they're going to be run, not just those with the loudest voices, and that's why we have the Electoral College. And I also explain how the over-the-top lead Hillary has in the popular vote is complete BS. I'm going to break it down real quick because I have a few new points I'd like to make, but I have a lot of these points that I talk about in that first video, and so I'm just going to briefly touch on them. But you can go back, listen to that first video, and hear all of the points in detail. But basically, the rundown is, 1, the Clintons are shady. This is proven by Project Veritas and WikiLeaks, who have a long history and have never been caught releasing false, misleading, or completely fabricated information. They have always been honest. WikiLeaks has a 100% rate when it comes to being honest and truthful and being trustworthy. So this has been proven that they're shady people. 2, the Clintons surround themselves with shady people like Podesta, who again has been proven to be shady thanks to WikiLeaks. 3, there was a proven concerted effort to commit widespread voter registration fraud. Registrations for names of deceased people were found. People were being found registered in multiple counties, and it was caught on camera that people were ripping up Trump supporter registrations. And again, this is something that's legitimate because one person was actually fired from the Clinton camp and one person resigned when this was made public. 4, and here's one point that people need to take into consideration that I didn't make in the first video. This is one of the new things. Those who supported Hillary, those who were the loudest people who screamed about the injustices of America, they didn't even vote. The entire cast of Hamilton, who actually did a fundraiser for the Clintons and found it necessary to lecture the vice president-elect in front of his children and children's friend about diversity, even though they put out a casting call that said whites need not apply, and about how they're supposed to represent all the people, they didn't vote. They never went out and cast their vote for Hillary. Colin Capertwit, he didn't vote. Mr. Take a knee at every game to stand up to the injustices that the flag represents, didn't even bother to go to be part of the change. He never voted. He didn't even register to vote. Over 70% of the people arrested the first night of the riots did not vote. 70% of people arrested during the riots in protest to Donald Trump winning never even voted. If all of those supporters never casted their ballot for Hillary, where's this huge lead coming from? I mean, think about it. All of the people who allegedly supported her the most never voted. So where's this huge lead coming from if her supporters weren't voting? In Virginia, the state with the governor who basically bought votes for Hillary by pardoning felons in exchange for them voting for her. Now, and this is something that I didn't mention in the first video that I thought was important to bring up, because people ask, well, how do you know that there were fraudulent votes cast? Well, one, you don't commit widespread voter registration fraud if you don't plan on following through with voter fraud, and we already proved that the voter registration fraud was happening. But that aside, in Virginia, again, the governor who basically bought votes for Hillary with pardons, in that state, if you are there legally, I mean, you're not an illegal alien, you are a legal person. You came here legally, but you're not a citizen. You're here on a work visa or on some kind of a temporary visa. But in that state, if you are here legally, you may obtain a form of ID or even a driver's license. So when they go to get their ID, they are illegally registered to vote. Because when you go anytime, like I went to get my new driver's license because my license had expired, it expired this year, my birthday. So before that, I went and I renewed it. And when I got there, they, register you to vote, or they ask you about registering to vote. And, I said, no, thank you. I'm already registered. But yeah, you go there, and these people who are not legal citizens and they're not legally allowed to vote because, yeah, they're here legally, but they are not citizens. And as not being citizens, they're not really supposed to be voting in our election, but they were registered to vote. And thousands of them have actually been found to have voted in previous elections and likely voted in this one as well. So illegal votes have been rendered in states like Virginia, where people who are here legally can obtain an ID, and then they are illegally registered to vote because even though they're here legally, they are not citizens, and so they are not allowed to be voting in our elections. But because they are registered, they are voting, even though they know, or at least should know, they are not supposed to be. So those votes are technically not legal. And again, most of these happen in blue states and almost always in favor of the Democrats. Now, in California, where they have sanctuary cities for illegal immigrants, many were marching against Donald Trump. Many of those were illegal immigrants that you saw in California during the protests after Donald Trump won. They were people that aren't even in this country legally. They're not supposed to be here, so they're not even supposed to have a say in what goes on in our country. But in a lot of the areas where they do not require voter ID, it is believed by a watchdog group called voterfrog.org that many of those illegals that you saw marching in protest illegally registered and voted in non-voter ID areas. So we know this whole she won the popular vote is bullcrap. Just on two things alone. Half her supporters never actually voted, and many who did vote weren't legally supposed to be voting. Then add the voter registration fraud that leads to voter fraud, governors pardoning felons in exchange for their vote, which makes those votes illegitimate because you can't buy a vote. I mean, shady stuff. Now, this leads to the second and third video where I give you a good hard look at those who want to be in charge of this country and who would basically be calling the shots if Hillary got her way and won. The diaper pin wearing, Play-Doh kneading, coloring book playing millennials, and the psychos of the world. Go back and watch the video. In the third video, I read the ever so rational response left by a Clinton supporter after Clinton lost. These pillars of the community who are supposed to be the highly educated. Let's just say he was recently arrested and is under investigation for terroristic threats. He was also fired from his job working with the mentally disabled. Another pillar of high education and class was a 450-pound woman dressed as Godzilla hooker who performed simulated sex acts on a cardboard cutout of Trump Towers and then exposed her naked breasts in front of children in protest to Trump. These are the people who want to run our country, y'all. People like the Godzilla hooker and the psycho who called Trump Lucifer, while he himself was wishing for children and women to be raped, tortured, and then murdered because Trump won. And a woman who is given $7 million, but suddenly wants to have taxpayers foot the bill for the recount she raised the money for. I just wanted to remind everyone of that. More news as it comes. Until then, have a great, non-offensive, non-denominational, safe space diaper pin day, y'all.